What's up, everybody? My name is Adam K, or as many people might know me as Just Bay, and tonight we're going to be bringing you the first episode of Final Boss, the WoW Endgame rating show that is featuring and hosted by many top-tier raiders from around the globe to talk about strategies, theory crafting, leadership, bosses, patch notes, classes, specs, all that good stuff. And the big part about it is to be able to answer your questions straight from their minds and their mouths right to your eyeballs and your ears, so that you can basically trickle down that awesome knowledge that you guys have and bring it right to you guys. So I am right over here. Haha. And the show has like 4 parts, right? We open up the show, we'll talk to our guests, introduce all that stuff. Then we have general raid-oriented discussion, where we were going to talk about things current, past, future, just to kind of be generalizing for raid-oriented stuff. And then each show, because we're going to feature either 2 people from different classes or specs, or just different spectrums of the raid in general, we are going to have raid-focused topics based on those classes. Tonight's topic, for example, is Enhancement, Shaman, Healing, and why it is just really, really, really stupid powerful, and what you can do to utilize it. And then future episodes will have tanking or DPS specializing things with different classes and stuff like that, just to have a focus. And then the final part of each show is going to be the Q&A part, where you can send us questions on FinalBossTV, and we will be able to answer your questions live on air and answer all those questions. A couple each week, and then each episode we always have more and more. But to not talk about me anymore, I'd like to introduce, joining me the first time and not the last, my lovely co-host, Jenni, aka Galexstraza, as she is also known on the internet.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess it's, Galexstraza for my hunter, Galexstraza for my warlock. So.
Mm-hmm. Which is, I guess we were talking about that before the show, too. You are actually switching from your hunter to a warlock now, correct?
I am indeed. Gotta provide better deeps next patch, and, you know, with the hunter nerfs, it's gonna be a little bit hard to keep up. So, you know, I'm gonna have better raid utility as warlock, and hopefully be able to make up for the loss of one of our best warlocks that we lost recently, Warmancer. So, you know, props to him, and hopefully we go into the next tier strong and capable. So we'll just get geared up and be ready for all these changes.
That's awesome. Well, best of luck. I mean, I know you were grinding out crazy the other day and leveling like a banshee, so hopefully that ends well and you can get carried this week. Also, one of our first guest bosses this week is going to be the runner-up for the best beard on the show, which is going to be Chillbros from Dread.
Hello. Yeah, I'm playing Enhancement Shaman, Chillbros, and pretty good at the game. Decent enough, and I think Bay is a little jealous about my beard, but that's too bad.
Oh, well,
Not everyone can be.
We can have an episode that's we can have an episode that's just about beards in the future, I'm sure. But you guys ended last tier, or this tier, I should say. You guys ended US 14th, West 38th, correct?
Yeah, something like that.
Something like that.
In 25 man.
In 25 man, yes.
Was that 10 man too? Okay, yeah, I thought so. Just 25.
Yeah, just 25.
But yeah, I wasn't really there for the whole tier. I joined like right when they were on, like almost at the end of Legion progression. But yeah, I finished out strong with them by carrying Radan, so that was pretty cool.
And Mr. Orange Shirt himself is also here with us. This is also going to be Primalshock, another shaman, I know. Oh no. But what's up, Primal?
Hi guys. Yeah, Primalshock and Reckoning. Fun times there. And
you guys ended US 9th, 25 man, West 26th.
Yep. We got man, that last Radan stretch kinda, we were 7th until Radan. Then some Canadian guild comes out of nowhere. Gets us Inhuman.
Inhuman, Unhuman? How much they beat you by? Was it like, I thought I heard it was a really quick, like they really got you by just a couple of minutes, like something like that, like the same night kind of deal?
I don't, I think it was the same night, but it was crazy. They came up, we didn't even see them coming, really, and it was like, what? Some French-Canadian guild beat us, so it was unfortunate.
Well, what are you gonna do?
Yeah. What are you gonna do? Canadians.
Yeah, we had a thing back in the day that back was like vanilla, that if you weren't French Canadian, you didn't get legendaries. On my old server way back in the day on Lothar, the French Canadian guild on our server had 7 Thunder Furies to our 2, which was totally balanced and fine. But so they definitely can come out of nowhere. Yeah. So moving on to this, we are going to first talk about tier 14 and what you guys thought about it, more or less. As the first intro tier to the Inst expansion, we were thinking of a whole lot coming into this, going that we're so excited about MOP, and the first raid has to be really, really exciting. And they gave us 3 raids that were all very linear in progression. So I know you guys had talks about that. So what did you guys think of tier 14?
I'll let you go first, Primal.
Oh, thank you. Tier 14, it was okay. I didn't do a whole lot of progression on, like, early on, I don't think, because I had shitty internet for a bit. But, well, actually, in MSV, I did a little. But Enhance wasn't very strong at the very start, and I got sad a little bit until I got to Fang and then Garajal is where we really pulled out ahead. And that was one of the fun fights. And, I don't know, most of the fun times I had were, Will dancing was really fun. I liked that. They did that pretty well. And, I don't know, Heart of Fear didn't really get me. Amber Shaper, I heard a whole lot of, Gorfine Ghost. That was up a lot.
That was definitely something that flashed back to anyone that raided back in the day, is definitely the Gorfine.
We had a whole picture of, it was like a mountain, and then it had, crossed off, and it was Gorfine Ghost, and it was uphill both ways, like snow, you hear that. Had to walk to school uphill both ways. But it was definitely one of the fights that could hold you up because certain people, same as Lei Shen was now, and I guess DA. But yeah, that was fun, and then Shaw was just, I hated that fight. It was just 7 minutes of boring, and then 10 minutes of more boring, except you gotta kill some ads.
Well, yeah,
it was a really underwhelming fight for me.
It didn't do much to really end the first tier of the instance, where you basically had just a straight, almost DPS check, where toward the end of the fight you just ignore half of the encounter, and even the differentiating between 10 and 25 man. In 10 man, you have to actually adhere by phase 1, but in 25 man you actually didn't. You just forget part of the encounter. They definitely really balanced that first big end-tier raid boss at the beginning of MOP really well.
Yeah, it was incredibly boring. You just AFK on a platform if you got picked first. And then, hey, fun, free kill.
What did you think about it, Chill?
Yeah, it was... Tier 14 was... I liked it a lot. I liked the little staggered releasing of raids that they did, where they released MSV first, and then 2-3 weeks later was Heart of Fear, and then after that was Endless Spring, because our raid group in my guild at the time, we cleared like one raid, and then the next raid came out, so we never really felt a rush to complete one raid so we could quickly get to the next one, and so we were just able to kind of progress along at a normal pace, and that was really great. But there was also some really annoying fights, like you guys were mentioning Shaw of Fear. Very boring. Didn't really feel like an end boss. It just felt really boring, really dull. But there was also the annoying fights like Heroic Vizier, Heroic Spirit Kings, which were, alright, so there's like a 20% chance, 50% chance, whatever, of something happening on the pull. If it doesn't happen, you wipe. If it does happen, you don't wipe. And then it was just very aggravating, wasting multiple consumables and attempts on just dying during a raid. Yeah, that was awful. But overall,
Dark Animus.
yeah, overall, yeah, that was this tier, and that was like the one bad thing about this tier. Overall, I liked tier 14. Tier 15 was the same way. I liked most of the fights. There wasn't really a good patchwork fight, which made me a little sad. I really like patchwork fights because I get to just sit there and push buttons, which is like my job.
Yeah, there really was no, like, there were gear check encounters, but there were no just straight up, like, gear check fights. that you would just literally be able to test your throughput more or less. There were
Yeah.
parts of that where like the burn phases transitions on Heroic Shaw were that way, but it was so almost like kind of convoluted where you didn't actually just get to do it. You still had to switch and then come back, which I guess is coordinated, but it's still, again, you just forget part of the fight. So Heroic Shaw was just kind of a big paper bag of not very good.
I think there were some burn. You could just. I got to tunnel on Darumu and Dark Animus the whole time. It was just a giant.
Well, now, yeah, but we're talking for tier
boss.
14, which is
Even during progression, I was just tunneling. That was my job.
During
was tunnel boss.
progression, I got to go elemental and chain lightning spam. That was really incredibly fun. Just pushing one button for the entire fight, and then also getting stuck having to play elemental. So overall, I didn't like Darumu. That was not a good fight.
And what was your tier 14 experience, Jenni?
Well, actually, I didn't actually raid tier 14 while it was current progression, because that's actually when I kind of came back into the game. I had quit WoW towards Cataclysm, like Firelands, and then I came back, and I was really, really, really behind. So really my WoW experience, my raiding experience has been more recent to tier 15. But in terms of tier 14, pretty much, you know, all the encounters that I did were pugs. I did a 25-man Heroic Shaw pug as soon as the new tier came out, and it was a lot of fun, but we cheesed a lot of the mechanics, to be honest with you.
Well, yeah, what we talked about, too, is like you can just totally negate part of the fight in both Phase 1 and Phase 2, which I don't really think that was what Blizzard intended at all. However, that is the way you beat the fight. And then once those kill videos got out, that you saw people doing this, and once that trickle-down effect again, you're like, well, why don't we just do it? You know, that's just how you did the fight. And it made it so much less headache. You get to finish the tier. But again, that's kind of a folly that I guess happens sometimes with encounter design. But
yeah, I guess it was more kind of evident with the Huddle and Fear in Phase 2. We just healed right through it instead of having to pass the orb back and forth. So we had like 3 designated people playing Monkey in the Middle with the ads, and then we just healed through the Huddle and Fear, whereas in 10-man it's a much more coordinated effort, and I mean, you actually have to pay attention. 25-man, it was just kind of a burn, and we, I guess, coordinated well enough to kill it, but it was pretty fun, so.
Yeah, and then so with tier 14, that was the intro tier, did they improve on tier 15, where we're at right now? Which all of us collectively have completed, as we went over that when we introduced people. But is there anything that sticks out in tier 15 that was better, or are there anything that sticks out that it's really, really worse compared to the intro tier that we had to deal with at first launch for MOP?
Well, I'll start off with one thing they improved on was before I was complaining about the Spirit Kings and Heroic Vizier, where unless RNG favored you, you wiped. They didn't have a single fight like that this tier, which is really cool, except unless you count Dark Animus. But Dark Animus was less about fight RNG and more about if one single person in your entire raid group messed up, then it was a wipe. And it was really easy to mess up because it was a very, very intricate fight. But other than that, there was a lot of good fights this tier where Blizzard didn't really have to bounce around a lot. Like, if you look at the hotfixes that Blizzard made, they didn't really hotfix that many fights. They hotfixed Horadon multiple times because they just felt it was too hard for the second boss. But other than that, there weren't that many changes, which I thought was really good of Blizzard to be able to balance it that well.
Yeah, it's definitely one that you can look at as tiers come out. If there are tons of like retroactive like oopsie daisies that you have to see in all these patch notes, then you know there might be some issues with the tier, and you wonder, should it have been tested more on the PTR, or are there just like, were there just slip ups and then boss mechanics they were trying to put in new ones and then there were too many or too few or something like that. So they definitely did improve in tier 15. Horadon was a bit of a huge roadblock for 10-man raiders as far as I know. 25-man was a whole lot different and easier in some respects, but yeah. So that was the only thing I couldn't think of in tier 15 that was bad, was Horadon as a pretty big, huge roadblock, and there wasn't much of a steep progression. It was just like, oh, this boss. Okay.
Oh
if you don't have a Mistweaver monk in 10-man, then what do? Pray, I guess.
Yeah.
Or bring 3 healers, but
yeah, when I did Heroic Horadon in 10-man, we wiped for literally 6 hours in one day, and then another 3 hours the next day. I mean, it was really rough, but you know, that was also when I was back on Deathwing instead of Kill Jaden, and I was in a less progressed guild, but at the same time, I mean, it was disproportionately hard for 10 men than it was for 25.
Yeah, absolutely.
One of the things I really liked about Tier 15 was they didn't have the gating. I don't like gating very much. And just being able to go through it when you can, and you either steamroll it through, depending how good you are, or you get blocked up on stuff. But it's purely how fast you can go through, and I like that. And the non-having of the impossible bosses, like Joe was saying, where if you get this, wipe, you're done.
Exactly.
That was annoying.
Yeah.
I think
That was really good.
the only thing I think we experienced in Tier 15 that was like that I can think of was Heroic Twins, which sometimes you don't get that first. You don't get the double ice meteor at the start of the transition from night to day, which can sometimes screw up. After a while, like right now, we just heal through it if we don't get the first meteor.
Right.
We just stand in the middle and just pop cooldowns, and it's fine. But when you're progressing on it, when you don't have all that gear, and you don't have the throughput really from the healers, then usually if you don't get that first meteor, you're like, oh, well, let's just die to supernova.
And at
I
least
think we saw
Blizzard like
how that-
hotfixed. Yeah, I think I heard something where like if you summon Celestials during the first person, then it can mess with the comet. But
Yes.
Yeah.
when it comes to that, at least Blizzard hotfixed. I think they hotfixed Vizier. They definitely hotfixed Spirit Kings. But they never hotfixed that fight. So that was too bad. But that one wasn't as bad as Spirit Kings and Vizier. But I completely forgot about how aggravating that was to have a really good first 3 minutes of a fight and then have to wipe because the fight decided to screw you over.
Yeah, definitely. That's the
Yeah.
only thing I can think of when I'm just thinking about things. We didn't really have anything that we like noted on that was too bad with 15. So I was trying to think about something that was bad, and that's the only thing I can really think of outside of the Horadon roadblock. So that's pretty good for a tier. Granted, the fact that it was completely linear, which I wanted to bring up, is that Primal said he likes the linear stuff. So, Chill, do you enjoy straight linear encounters as well? Or how does that work with you guys?
I don't really care about linearity as much. I mean, it's just going to be the same way as it always is, where we're just going to go to the next boss that's considered to either give the best loot, be the easiest, or whatever the GM and officers decide is going to be the next boss we're doing. And the linearity of the raid instance doesn't really impact that, because we'll skip bosses. Like a lot of people killed Heroic Twins before they killed Heroic Dark Animus, because that was the smart thing to do. But that even then, it just doesn't really matter to me if you can skip a couple bosses and still move on like you could in Ulduar, or have it like at the beginning of Blackwing Descent, where you can kill either of the first two bosses first. That doesn't really matter to me.
Yeah, I said no. If from a progression standpoint, Guild, when you're pushing in the top of the crust, basically, top of the pack, leader of the pack, is if you like options in fights, or if there's like if a direct line to the end boss is better. Because I know there is a little bit of non-linearness coming in the next tier with tier 16.
Oh.
And I've heard things that is for or against.
And do you mean like a normal mode progression, because in normal like you literally can't skip the boss, or do you mean heroic progression where you can skip a boss or two?
Well, yeah, I'm in for heroic progression. Because
right.
normal is straight through, basically, because
Right.
you can't skip anything. But for heroic, like we cherry-picked in this tier. We definitely, in tier 15 with Crisp, we definitely cherry-picked around because we knew which bosses were easier based on gear, because there wasn't a slope. It was more of like peaks and valleys throughout the entire tier, where you can totally skip Council and beat the next 2 or 3 bosses no problem, and then go back to Council afterwards. But yeah, if without the cherry picking, do you like the non-linear versus the straight shot right to the end?
I like like I said, it doesn't really matter to me, I guess. I kill the next boss and I move on. I don't really think about, I don't want to do this boss, let's do the other boss we can do. It's whatever. I'll kill the boss, I guess.
It's really nice to just have all of the bosses available instead of, hey, you have 3 instances spread out over 3 months whenever they're going to gate them open. And you're able to actually pick, like, okay, we never want to do Dark Animus until we have this many pet classes to cheese the fight, otherwise it's going to be hell on earth.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I mean, it was the last boss people worked on, and it was just not having to do that boss and being able to do Iron Con instead, or Twins before it, is very good, whereas maybe those would have been on the last tier that you can't access yet, so you can't get the gear from it. And so it just really helps your progression to be able to pick. You have the entire instance open available to you, except for the last boss, obviously. And you can just you can go to fights that you know you can kill with time, instead of fights where you know you're going to need the extra gear or possibly a different comp. And so it's just very nice to be able to have that access.
Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
I would agree. It's convenient, definitely.
Yeah. So then, with Tier 14 and 15 out of the way, Tier 16 has been at least mostly tested on normal mode 10-man, and Heroic just started. So what do you guys find out? I haven't touched the PTR yet, personally. Just not on my schedule. But what have you guys found out with Tier 16? What is looking better? And then what is probably looking worse? The first thing that I think of for worse is that almost every encounter is cleave, cross dot, and AoE oriented, where that incredibly favors ranged or heavy AoE classes, and there's really no fight that is just player skill based and like damage oriented, like we talked about earlier. There's no patchwork-esque fight coming in Tier 16. So what have you guys figured out about that so far?
Well, with the new tier bonus, the cleave and like AoE fights are going to be a little nicer for us. Like for instance, there's Dark Shaman, where we'll always, hopefully, like ideally, we'll always have like 2 flame shocks up. So that means our tier 16 4-piece bonus will be proccing more, which means we'll be doing more damage than we would have been this tier. So that's pretty nice to me. And then there's also, I didn't do a ton of testing, but there are tests, or there are fights rather, where enhancement healing is looking really good. But we'll get to that later.
But so yeah, in the whole realm of just what's the boss's comparison to what we have for 14 and 15, are they still making improvements on what we saw before, or are like I watched some PTR stuff of the Korkron Annihilator, and that looked kind of just like a new Mimron, where there's just like there's an area you have to avoid, and there's a missile, and then there's AoE, and that's the whole fight. And then he just goes into an AoE phase where you just like either clump up and heal, or you have healing destination spots so you don't get too hit by the missiles. But that's all I really noticed. So what's Tier 16 have in store for us?
I haven't really done any PTR testing.
You were terrible. I was just.
Oh.
I'm sorry. Until they open 25 man, that's when I get into it.
Yeah, that's true.
But
I guess there's a different.
Man, I don't care to log on. I've messed with the set bonuses and the trinkets. That's about it.
No, I understand.
Yeah.
But so basically, though, so it's basically just Dread that has had a lot of the because I know we have logs to look at later that you guys have from the PTR. So, is there anything that really sticks out to you though, Chill, about Tier 16?
Not really. Like Primal, I've only done a couple fights on PTR. The first one was Dark Shamans, which was very melee unfriendly at the time, but I hope they'll change that. And then I also did, I don't remember what it was called, but there was like a robot, and you had to fight the dude. It was the big Iron Man suit goblin guy, and then you had the 2 conveyor belts. I don't remember that fight's name right now.
I can't remember what his name is. Chat room might be able to tell us the name, but I can't think of the name of it either. Siegecraft. There you go.
But yeah, that fight, that one also looked really melee unfriendly because he would shoot out these rotating gears, and the farther you were from them, the less likely you'd be hit because you had more time to move. So if you're melee, it was really like you'd be hit by them. And they also do a pushback, which means you're away from the boss, not able to do damage except for like cast lightning bolt if you're enhancement or whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, so from the 2 fights I've done so far, very melee unfriendly expansion. So I'm or tier rather, but so I'm hoping maybe those are the only 2 fights and I've just been unlucky.
Yeah, no, I totally understand. There's definitely some things that I've seen and heard about that are, I mean, as coming from Melee right now, and Jenny can just kind of laugh at us. We've always kind of had that there she goes, that kind of stipulation where if you don't bring a lot of ranged and you have a really melee-oriented guild and raid, then you're usually going to have a bad time. Because there's not been many fights in a while that really are good for melee. A lot of fights have the targeting stuff, like, say, for example, Rogue Lei Shen, where you need to have so many ranged out, or all the lightning spawns in the melee, and then you're all dead. So then you need to have enough range for certain abilities, or the fact that ranged can always DPS while moving away from things, 2 points. And if melee are moving, if they don't have their sprints are up, or if they're just off cooldown and get to move again, you literally just lose damage. And that happened last expansion, if I remember, where melee was just buffed, attack power was buffed to help alleviate that thing, which was kind of a band-aid fix where they were, oops, melee aren't even going to be taken to these fights anymore for heroic progression guilds because of they just can't keep up the damage. So then they band-aid fixed the attack power, and they made us like, you know, a little bit better. And then it was a little overpowered on standalone fights like Ultraxion. But I mean, that's something that they hopefully don't have to run into with Tier 16, because as they've just confirmed, it is the last raid of the expansion now, which was the next thing I was going to bring up, that there are no 5.5 filler raids. There's going to be no Halion, which I'm kind of sad about, but
I wanted
I want more. Yeah, they need more dragons this expansion. We faced like what, 3 dragons? That is not enough. When I have to tell my real life friends what I'm doing in World of Warcraft, I can't say dragon slaying because that's wrong. And that's just, I should be able to say that when I'm playing World of Warcraft. I should be able to say I'm slaying dragons.
Dinosaurs and hydras and thunder kings, and then feeding their hearts to Wrathion. You know, it's kind of...
Yeah.
There were like 3 more doors in Dragon. Whatever. they had options. We could have gone back, killed a dragon or 2.
And even if that, the only dragon that I can remember killing is Elegon. He's not even real. He's like a computer program. He's not even a dragon. You know, he's not like a real... And that's the thing I think each expansion should have, definitely needs a dragon. Because that's kind of a staple of World of Warcraft. And I know we're helping a dragon. We're basically making a raid boss for the future. You know, which we, you know, either confirm or deny that Wrathion's going to be a boss in the future or he's going to be a good guy. But I mean, so we're helping one, but we're not fighting one. And that's what I was thinking. There was going to be some weird, like, Shaw build-up manifestation toward the end of the expansion, and we'll get a 5.5, like, straight shot on Nixia raid where it's some Shaw corrupted bone dragon. Just why not? You know, just to do it, just to tie us over, because we're going to look at being in 5.5 now for hopefully not 10 months, but it might be 8 to 10 months without anything else. So hopefully...
It's gonna be dry.
Pet battles.
Pokemon.
There you go. Pet battle tournaments. You
Pet
battle
battle tournaments.
Wrathion with his dragon pets.
Well, maybe there's your dragons, Chill.
Yeah, there we go.
You pet battle Wrathion, and all his pets are dragons.
That
would be nice.
After like the corresponding dragons, like there's a little baby Deathwing pet that he uses, and it's called Dada. I saw it on Reddit, and I thought it was the funniest thing ever. They all have like little nicknames. That
would be awesome. I mean, there is that pet battle tournament coming on the Timeless Isle, where the blue post about it was that it's kind of like a relentless thing where you get, you know, you have like a team of more than 3, and the guys you're fighting have more than that. So maybe it's just not data mineable now because it's just not available in the game patches. But what if later down the road you can fight Wrathion in a pet battle?
Yeah, that's actually going to be the filler raid. It's not going to be an actual raid. You're going to be just fighting Wrathion.
You're going to fight Wrathion in pet battles.
That is patch 5.5.
Okay.
There we go.
So Timeless Isle content coming in patch 5.5, confirmed on Final Boss. You could fight Wrathion in pet battles.
There we go.
Yeah, I'm going to be screwed. I only have a level 10 pet. That's the highest.
Yeah, I don't pet battle. I think the highest level pet is like level 11.
Well, that's, yeah. I actually only have like 5 or 6, and they're all the ones I bought from the digital store because they're too cool. But Legendaries coming up with that, and if it's a legendary pet battle, because there are epic pets in the game, so what if we fight legendary pets? But what if we talk about the actual Mist of Pandaria legendary system? I know, I just saw Primal just kind of heavy sigh there, because not only were there multiple stages, and it was the People's Legendary, which is fine, but really, what... Was it a good idea to give everyone this Legendary quest chain, where everyone's on this kind of very grindy, long, expansion-long Legendary chain? Or do you think it was better in earlier iterations where it was a kind of a guild-oriented group achievement where you went out and fought the Green Dragons, or you fought the dudes at the portals about the Green Dragons, or the drop that randomly happened in a raid, and then you had to farm a bunch of mats? Like, what was good about the MoP Legendary system, and what was bad?
Well,
and I'm wondering if there's one scale that's a little more...
Yeah, well, I think with you know, having the individual legendary quests, the individual feels a little bit more connected to the world and the characters and the lore, and the WoW community has shrunken, you know, significantly in the past few years, and I think it's a good way of keeping their players engaged without having them having to be too reliant on having a large community, which they don't currently have. So I think it's Blizzard's way of really connecting to the player and reaching out. I don't know. That's just how I would think of it. Like, it sucks that they're really grindy and it's not like a group effort, but I think it's also pretty smart considering that, you know, there's not the same number of World of Warcraft players that there were 3 years ago.
Oh, definitely. I understand that, yeah.
I didn't like it.
Primal, yeah, you can. I'll let you QQ first.
It's how many quest line? What it was 4 quests.
One a patch. One a patch. Yeah.
So it's like, and it's all RNG. It's like, hey, if you could get this week, and then you can get screwed another week. Like there were people that would never get runestones in my guild, and they were just screwed for like for weeks. And it was stupid. It's the most RNG quest line ever. It was horrible. I hated it, and it's not legendary. Everyone has it. It's a epic. That's it. That's all it is.
Yeah.
It's not. I've never raided when I could get a legendary for enhancement. I didn't raid in vanilla where you could two-handed sulfur us, whatever. So I mean, I would be fine going back to the system where I don't have one yet. Maybe my day is coming, but this cloak isn't a legendary. Of course, it helps that there's no drama, of course, on who's gonna get first. Oh my god. There's that goes away, so I guess it helps a little bit with the guilds. Like, you don't have upset raiders that are gonna cry about it for an entire expansion because they never got their legendary.
Yeah.
In my opinion, that's the best thing about it. You don't have whiny raiders. But then I didn't like it at all.
Yeah, and just to note on the RNG thing, it just felt that once you finally got the 6,000 Valor, you were like, I just killed these bosses for 6 weeks in a row, and then did some heroics, and then I got this upgrade, right? So I guess the steps were definitely leading up to, and the end step, the cloaks do look cool, but I do feel that, I mean, personally for me, like it was just kind of like it was a grab bag, because you could either progress faster based on the DPS improvements of the meta gem or the extra gem sockets in your weapons, or now the cloak, which gates a world boss and also has a huge impact on just overall raid DPS. If you don't have people that are up to snuff on that, or if you're in Jenni's spot where you have to re-roll a class, it's a huge setback.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be really rough. Like, I just barely got my legendary cloak too. It's just so RNG. I don't think I've ever had a drop on a boss that was not Radan or Relation. No joke. Like, it just never ever dropped. So it's going to be really hard when I'm re-rolling my Warlock because, you know, I'm going to be missing my meta gem. That's going to be a huge deal. You know, I'm not going to get my legendary cloak for a while. Who knows, the next time I'll see a heroic unerring vision of Lation. So it'll be tough to play catch up. You know, I know that it probably wouldn't be good for whiny raiders to increase the drop chance after the tier has ended, but I do feel like once the tier has ended, maybe they should be like, okay, well, you know, if you've killed it, I at least feel like based on the difficulty of the raid, it should be proportionally a higher drop chance, but that's just me.
Well, yeah, that's the one thing I was thinking about too, is that it's not only that it's a random drop chance for that, but they hotfixed in the fact that Radan and Lation drop the runestones. Before then, I sat on 7 runestones for almost a month and a half. You just don't get your legendary yet? Like, there's no way to do it, there's no other outside sources you can do, you just have to wait. And that doesn't feel very legendary when you get it, because you basically just rolled the dice every week, like, did I... Oh. And it was kind of a letdown when you finally got it, you were like, finally! It wasn't like this big triumphant, you know, feeling where you finally, like, accomplished this epic quest. You just like, well, the RNG gods were with me these last 3 weeks. So...
Yeah,
I was one of the first in my guild to get it. And
yeah, I was
even
like
still,
2nd or 3rd.
I still hated the entire system, even though I got it really early. It was just stupid.
Yeah, I mean, there's a difference between... This system is nicer than Kata's in terms for Blizzard, because it's a lot easier to balance fights, right? When you're balancing a fight, you can make the assumption that everyone has the cloak or whatever, or like, I mean, I'm talking about next year, because next year Blizzard has said, just recently actually, that the legendary cloak is going to be available on day 1. You can like get it instantly if you're lucky enough, or not lucky enough, but you grind enough and you get a raid to kill all the bosses. But so that's a lot easier for Blizzard to balance fights when they can just assume everyone has the legendary. Whereas in Kata, when they're balancing, like for instance 10 versus 25 man drop rates, they had to balance out. Well, they balanced it out incorrectly because like 25 mans would get like 2 or 3 legendary stats, where 10 mans even got 1 in Firelands, and that was stupid. And so, in terms for Blizzard's balancing fights and balancing the legendary drop rates and stuff like that, it's a lot better, this system is. But to me, everything else is wrong with it. It's not a legendary, it's a cool looking epic. Right now, the legendary proc on the cloak is less damage than the legendary meta gem we got 2 content tiers ago, or 1 content tier, or patch, I mean.
Yeah.
And that's so dumb. I mean, maybe they'll buff it and that would be cool, but still, it's not a legendary. It's a cool thing with a proc. It's a cloak with a proc. It's not some big glowy weapon that you smash people with, or that copies all your spells. It's just, oh look, sometimes I do AoE damage. It's just, it feels really lame, and it's not unique. A big thing about legendaries is that it's unique. Only a few people per guild get them. And I mean, that kind of sucks for everyone who doesn't get one, but it's not like it's bad for them. I mean, as an enhancement shaman, I have never had an enhancement. I've never had a legendary weapon. I don't count Sulfur as that. Vanilla, I just don't count personally. And it's just, it's not the same to have a legendary now as it was then. I mean, at least people can get legendaries. Like before, it was only people who rated like at least 9 hours a week, or maybe a little less than that, who could get legendaries, and that was too bad for everyone else who played the game. But when it comes to something like a legendary, maybe it should be a little more restrictive to people who are at the higher tiers.
Yeah, and your point about that is like, it's when it's like it's almost not, it's not a status symbol as much as it is like a guild feeling to have these 3 or 4 stabs in your guild, right? And it elevates you all. But if you, it's kind of like what Syndrome said in The Incredibles: if everyone is super, then no one is. So where's the legendary feel when everyone has the same cloak? That the quest is personally fun, but you don't feel like you've really earned much other than just doing a quest that takes you a year and to finish. So it has some ups and downs. It definitely helps the DPS side and the raid oriented progression side, because they can really balance raids easier than like the RNG of getting 3 or 4 staffs really fast and then all of a sudden you just destroy Heroic Firelands, or as it is now, they can just kind of base it off of that. Everyone around this time is going to have this many and this many and this many, and they can really kind of like ease that in. So there are pros and cons, but it's difficult.
Yeah. I think it would be interesting if Blizzard, incorporated legendary drops once again. Maybe in a future expansion. Who knows?
Legendary drops in like how it was the old system?
Yeah, like how the old system, where you had to, have loot priority for who gets it. It definitely felt more epic. It put you at an edge. Because it's true, everyone has a legendary cloak. Like, there's so many people. I'd go into an LFR with like completely undergeared players, eye level like 525 or something, and they already have their legendary cloak before me, and it's just, I don't know. I feel like if you invest more time into the game, I feel like you should also kind of get the payback that is not heroic loot, but in terms of the legendary quest, like maybe try buffing the drop chance for heroic so that people would maybe feel more motivated, like, wow, like I can get my legendary sooner, I care about my gear, so I'm going to move on to heroics because, it's clearly more difficult, whereas, I could be doing LFR every week, casually logging in once a week, doing LFR all the way through, and then have my legendaries just like anyone else.
Yeah, that's definitely a separation, and I think the LFR point to be able to get the legendary, at least the gems, is fine enough because they're trying to, again, broaden the demographic of raiding. The whole point of LFR was to make more people want to raid, and now with the onset of Flex in the next batch, that we're going to see even more people just raiding, which is great. That's fine, but again, it just comes back around to the fact that the people that have been raiding all this time, they're just kind of giving away the loot that we've always wanted to work for, and have a huge motivation point for us, and a huge kickback for us for doing what we do. And now that you can kind of just get it to everyone, it kind of lessens it a little bit. Again, it has good and it has bad. I don't think there's any perfect situation for legendaries unless you guys have a suggestion for one.
Give an enhancement shaman one. GG.
Give.
I really liked Cataclysm's system. As long as they can balance like the 25-man versus 10-man drop rates, like they sort of did in Dragon Soul more than they did in Firelands. I just really like the system where there's a little bit of RNG, where you didn't know how much of the item that you needed was going to drop, but you knew like that you were going to get it within a certain amount of time, give or take a week. And that I thought that was a really good system, and it was also the caster staff was a little less good because not only was it not only could you get like 2 in the time it took to get 0, or like 2/3 of one to 10-man, there was also so many people who could use the Dragon Wrath that people would still go back and run Firelands the next tier, and that shouldn't happen if they're like in any case. You should never feel pressured to have to go and run an old tier to be able to progress in the current tier. That's just dumb.
Oh well, that the biggest point of that is that people months and months and months later farmed Ulduar. And the first heroic Lich King kills were the guilds that had 7 Valenirs on every healer, and it was totally easy because no matter whose mace is on cooldown, you know, someone's got a shield up, and it trivialized the fight, which was a powerful item, but again, it made you have to go back in content to farm for this weapon that is just so good that you can use it forward, which I guess is a big balancing point that they really can't always nail. And that's the thing they've talked about before, but I agree with you that going back to the legendary
so counterintuitive.
Exactly.
I don't think it's a bad system.
I mean, with my warlock, I mean, I'm gonna be grinding to get a legendary shot touch gem that I can't even use. Like, come on, I'm gonna be grinding for like at least a few weeks, and then I get this gem, cool, and then I throw it away. Like I don't know. I feel like if they are gonna have this grindy system and you have to build to the next quest, you should at least be able to use what you earned before. Kind of like how they started doing after this Shot Touch gem when Tier 14 ended. But you know, it's just I'm not looking forward to that one bit, and it's gonna make it a lot more difficult for class changes. But I mean, maybe they're intentionally doing that as well.
Well, that's the one thing I wanted to talk about too. I guess you brought it up, is that the first steps of the legendary quest get you gems for weapons at the current time. But when we're in tier 16 and you reroll an alt, or if you're not totally caught up on the quest, or you need to reroll a different character, kind of what the situation might have with Jenni is, you know, might be a lot more widespread than you know, because have patches change, you might need people to play different classes, and if they're not all the way up on the legendary quest, then they're already at a disadvantage, not to mention that the first part of the quest, you get gems you can't even use anymore. So our thing I talked about when we were looking at this whole system is that why isn't the cloak that we get have a Shaw Touch socket in it?
That would be sweet.
Is that too much to ask, Blizzard? For the Shaw Touch socket in our legendary cloak?
Apparently so.
It would make sense, but nah.
Why would they? They want you to go back, grind, and then forget about it. Whatever.
I think that maybe they didn't have the foresight to think like, oh yeah, we're not going to use these gems anymore, so we just kind of have to do the quest anyway. Like, I don't know. I think it should, you know, each legendary reward that you get should, you know, be better and better and better and usable, so they all build on each other. But, you know, the fact that they have a gem that's just completely useless in tier 15 and in tier 16, it does make the grind a little bit bitter.
Well, yeah, it just feels like you lose part of what you were working for in the first place.
It's still on PTR. You never know. They could
of
come out and
course
surprise us, and legendary
of course
could have it. But...
Of course, and that also brings up that item upgrades aren't affecting the cloak. So you actually lose 8 eye levels when you upgrade to the cloak. You gain the proc, but don't the stats actually decrease on the cloak, if I'm not mistaken?
Yep, you can't upgrade the cloak. Stays at 600 eye level, LOL. So you get a little tiny cloak proc, at least for enhancement. I don't know how it is for other people, but you get a tiny DPS increase, but you're also losing stats. So it feels really weird that this final legendary item is just so meh.
just
not legendary.
Meh.
Yeah.
Exactly. So it has. I mean, they put on that cool. At least they made it look a little cooler with the little foofy wings behind it. But then again, you find out, at least it's not confirmed as far as I know specifically, that the wings only proc with the proc. they're not just like a static thing. So they're only up when it's up. So as a melee, when am I ever going to see my cool cloak? When we're in the cluster of 8 to 12 of us with all the spell effects and the boss's butt and the tanks and the things on the ground, and when am I gonna look cool with my cloak? Because you can't. Well, when you're alone
when you're
farming,
killing, dummies. There we go.
And you're attacking
dummies.
target dummies in Stormwind, or Ogremar, or wherever. That's kind of weird. You have to admit that's kind of weird, but
it's a stupid system.
I don't know. But what's not weird, however, is this segue into tell you guys real quick about part of the show and part of what I'm trying to accomplish with Final Boss and the whole crew. What we're trying to do here is connect all these different endgame and rating focused and PvP focused, of course, too. Which is not we're not going to really talk about PvP on this show unless it really has a tie into the show, into balance and stuff like that. Is bring all of these different theory crafting communities together. Right? And the first one that I can really say that I'm incredibly thankful for and happy to be working with right now is going to be howtopriest.com, or the H2P. Howtopriest.com is an awesome resource for priests of all specs, races, sizes, and colors to really get any of the information they want to know about stat weights, breakpoints, gearing choices, as you level up a new priest, leveling up, troubleshooting and stuff like that into endgame rating and what you want to look for. Trinkets, what's coming in the new patch, rotation area questions, all that kind of stuff is definitely what you want to check out, is howtopriest.com. I am super excited to be having them on the producer list right here for the show, and we are super happy to be working with them. And if we ever get to the future with other ones, then that's the whole point. We want to be able to network and bring all these different great communities together under the Final Boss roof just for you guys. So that's awesome. However, I don't have a good segue into the real focus topic of this whole show. And the reason, one of the big reasons what Final Boss exists, is to talk with these top tier raiders about things that really pertain to their class. And the focus topic tonight is Enhancement, Shaman, Healing. And when I first...
segue for you.
You got a segue for me?
Okay. Speaking of priests, you know what priests do? Heal. You know what Enhancement Shaman do? Heal. Bam.
Bam, there you go.
There we go.
And you know what's better? Well, when I first mentioned it, I'm sure there were people that were like, Enhancement Shaman Healing? And when I brought the topic up too, just in my chat room a while ago on my stream, people were like, what? And I've gotten asked before, why do I keep hitting Healing Stream Totem or dropping Healing Reigns? Like, isn't it a DPS loss? And it's like, it's a very small one, but the throughput you gain from Enhanced Shaman Healing is just way too good. And I don't know who wants to take this away. We have definitely a little bit to talk about here about the whole topic. So whoever chimes in first gets it.
Enhancement Healing, yay. What is Enhancement Healing? Enhancement Healing is getting a 5-stack of Maelstrom Weapon and putting Healing Rain down when your raid is grouped up. Hooray! What happens? We beat our Resto Shaman's Healing Rain output by double, at least, and we can do like upwards of 80k HPS if the entire raid is grouped up. It's pretty overpowered. Of course, you can. It costs us nothing to put Healing Stream Totem down as well, so you just do that on cooldown, and then we lose about what? Purge came up with a number about 3% damage for using Maelstrom stacks on dropping Healing Rain. So it's not a huge deal, but you gain a lot of healing. And it was really good for especially this tier, because they kept buffing it for some reason. It's like, our AoE sucks, so let's buff Healing Rain.
That was a huge point too, and it's getting buffed in the patch. It's getting buffed again, and we're gonna go over here to look at some logs again just to show you guys that we're not just talking out of our butts here. It is a huge thing that a lot of the more progressed top guilds figured out early on, that you could literally almost drop a healer in case of if you had 1 or 2 instruments in your raid for AoE cleave healing if you needed them. Because the big points are too is that it is free, it is instant, and it heals more than a Resto Shaman. So, and even in the same case, we didn't even talk, you didn't bring up Ancestral Guidance, which is our burst healing cooldown, which can heal more than multiple Shadow Priests, honestly, depending on the gear and when you time the things that you have to do, and if stuff lines up like perfect, you can really put out some throughput, and it's just free. It just happens, and there have been multiple occasions for me, specifically in our Heroic Dark Animus kill, our first kill. It's in our kill video too, is our main tank, Sam, actually says, as the boss dies, Bay's AG just saved my ass, because it hit him with the boss attack, and he didn't die from the residual explosion that happens with him as well. And that, it rings in a kill. So it is an incredibly powerful tool that not everyone knows about, because, again, when I first brought it up, people were like, what? Why would you do that? Enhanced Shamans don't heal.
And then they're even giving us Healing Tide Totem for free, so yay!
And, yeah, we were going to talk about that in a second, but...
Were you going to show the logs?
Well, yeah, that's what I was going to go over to you too real quick. So the first thing I wanted to show you guys is something current that isn't totally overblown, which will go right here. This right here is a log from, this is an overall log on Raden, and this is by Dread, and Chill and Purge are right down here respectively. And just to put in the lines and stuff are cool. I wanted to leave them on the screen just to see, but Chill and Purge both did 31 million healing in the entire fight. And if you look, that there is definitely a huge jump from the off healing from a Boomkin and a Shadow Priest, another Shadow Priest right here, and another Shadow Priest right here, that they did, 14 million, 11, 10, 8.5 to 28 and 31 million, each of them. And that's between Ancestral Guidance, Healing Rain, and a little bit from Healing Stream Totem. Again, Healing Stream Totem is completely free as well as Healing Rain, so you just might as well drop it. It also glyphs with the reduction in elemental damage taken as well. So as you can, the other comparison here too, which you don't have it in this log, we have it in the next one, is this is the entire encounter. And the big spike for healing on Raden is definitely during Phase 2. So here we look at Phase 2. Just Phase 2 alone, which is the burn phase in Raden, at 40% to 5%, when he's basically AoEing completely. This is what you do. This is a Holy Paladin at 26 million. This is Chillbros at 26 million. And this is Purge at 24 million. There is a ton of healing that Enhancement puts out that is definitely a good thing to have in the raid. And on top of, we didn't really talk about, we're not going to talk about single target DPS in the raid and how we're the best burst and yada yada yada, but just on healing alone, not only is this class DPSing the boss, it is also keeping your raid alive. And this is a Disc Priest down here. That's with Divine Shell, Aegis, Divine Star, Aegis,
to be fair,
Spirit
that
Shell.
guy is like in Holy Vral, like his main is a Resto Shaman, and that's like this was our first week of split raids.
Split raids.
So yeah,
okay.
that's his ult who isn't too well geared. But yeah, like we're still doing more healing than a healer.
Exactly. And then here's
And
the
also,
off
if
healing
you-
from the Boomkin.
If you click on our lines, like show our lines, you can also see where the AG spikes are when we push our healing cooldown.
Right here. There's Chills, and there's Purges. You guys actually stagger them as well to get even more benefit out of them. You don't actually both put them at the same time, because that would be a huge waste. So this is this is right here. This is probably what? This is Spirit Shell from Reese, I'm assuming. This huge spike.
Yeah.
Most likely, yeah. Actually, no. It looks like
Something
he
like
is
that.
holy. So Divine Hem, I'm assuming then, is this huge AoE cooldown toward the end of the fight. But this is a real healer's cooldown throughput, and these are Enhancement Shamans.
And
It's definitely
ours
nothing to
didn't-
scoff at.
Ours didn't include our Ascendance damage either. If ideally we could line up Ascendance with AG and some healing rains and be even
Correct.
higher than that.
Yeah.
And that's fun to do.
Yeah, Ancestral Guidance is healing based on the damage done of the Enhancement Shaman, and our big 3-minute cooldown Ascendance makes us ignore armor and do pure spell damage, which is buffed by our Mastery. So the burst potential is probably even higher. That's what you said. You didn't line it up with that for this, so it would have been even more.
Yeah, but it was a little hard because we kill Raden too fast, so that we can't really line up cooldowns with everything.
Oh,
which makes
shucks.
me really mad, so I can't rank very well.
Yeah.
But,
Oh, well,
yeah.
shucks. Exactly.
It's too
And then
bad.
the other logs, too, to show what's coming in the future, which this one is just pretty, honestly. There is a fight coming in the future called Malkorok. who has a kind of Tortoise shell similar thing where you can heal people up and they get a shield to mitigate damage that's incoming. And there's kind of this constant shield versus no shield mechanic in the encounter. And on normal mode, which is not super intense, as there's only big 4 peaks and valleys as the phases kind of go phase 1, phase 2, phase 1, phase 2, back and forth between the shield phase and the non-shield phase. Demon Fork here is Purge.
Right, his name is from... There was a weapon that drops in lower Blackrock Spire called Demon Fork, which is a 3.4 speed one-hander. So when eye levels were being scaled up for testing, you would have this very high item level, very slow weapon, which means all of our weapons did more damage, or so we thought. Apparently Blizzard normalized our attacks,
Yes.
which means we actually did less damage because it didn't have any stats on it,
Mm-hmm.
which is too bad. But that's why he named himself Demon Fork, because of the
Yes.
hopeful rolls that he could have had.
The biggest thing you notice on here, too, is the peaks and valleys of this fight just have the phase 1 and phase 2. This is obviously phase 1 when you have the shields on. This is phase 2 when you're building the shields, correct? Is that how the fight goes? Or this is right before the phase transitions, right?
I think what's going on there is those are multiple attempts.
Okay, well, I thought this is one attempt. That's fine. If it's multiple attempts overall, this is the building the phase, and this is the rest of the encounter where there's not as much overall healing. But a lot of what you see is that even with just Healing Rain being a huge less burst than Ancestral Guidance, the overall healing output during these attempts is just ridiculous. Ancestral Guidance did, if I'm reading my math correctly, is at 110 million healing over 4 attempts, and is basically the highest throughput heal in the entire fight. And even over, this is obviously a Blood Death Knight's healing, and then this is where the Resto Shaman is. And this is a Holy Paladin, again, there's a huge difference in overall HPS. Even if you average out these attempts, you've got 104,000 to 83,000. And that's just a huge difference in throughput. And again, it just happens. There's no different rotation or anything. It just exists. And it's something not a lot of guilds knew about, and is why it's, you know, we're talking about it now. The other part, which this is the pretty log, this is heroic Malkarok.
And this
Now,
is also multiple attempts.
Yes, I think the orange is 1 attempt, correct? That's what breaks off? I believe
yeah,
the orange bars
probably.
are attempts. Yeah, this one actually organizes it better because this one has, like, here, and then there's 2, and then there's, yeah, so.
Yeah.
So the peaks and values on this, again, is the phase 1 to phase 2 transitions where you're stacking your shields, and then you're just using your shield to mitigate damage, and you're stacking your shields again, and whatever. And again, without fault, by a huge margin, over a Holy Paladin, and this is a Resto Druid, and this is also a Resto Shaman. I'll take out the Death Knight right here, because his healing is only personal. You basically have, you're going into this fight with 4 healers, even though one of them's a DPS.
Right.
And
I
he
think
is...
it's being pointed out to me that these are all phase 1. Dread never saw phase 2, so it's a little hard to be able to compare it. But I mean, it still shows that the one point that Purge really wanted to get across was that you could blow your Healing Rain and AG on the pull, and all the other healers could just save their cooldowns for later in the fight in phase 2 when they would need it. They wouldn't have to waste time to be able to get everyone's shield up.
Yeah, definitely. And that was a big... Uh-oh. We just lost
Yeah,
Chill's
my
camera.
bad. Wrong
Okay.
button.
Wrong button. That's fine. You can't see it. You're screwing up the entire stream. Thanks! But there's definitely a lot to be taken from this. And that biggest the point I forgot, I didn't mention that, is that you can literally save all of your healer cooldowns and use one, at least in 10-man format, use one Enhancement Shaman's cooldowns to stack the entire raid and do that much healing within this small time period. And you can see the burst peaks are almost always above the other healers, which is just so much effective healing when you really want to get down to it. And that's like 25,000-ish more HPS. And again, that's from Enhancement Shaman. A lot of people knew that existed, and that is why it is broken. And it's getting buffed in the patch. What is getting buffed in the patch exactly?
Well,
Healing Rain.
first of all, they decided that Healing Rain 25s wasn't strong enough for Resto Shaman, which is you know, Blizzard decided that instead of buffing Resto Shaman directly, or instead of buffing what Resto Shaman are bad at, which is spread healing, they're just going to buff their stack up healing even more. They did that before last patch where they buffed healing rain by 20%, which Enhancement also felt. They're doing it again. We're in 25-man. They're raising the AoE cap from 8 targets to 14 targets. So your healing rain will be healing for like double more than what is on live, and so that's good for Resto Shaman, and that's also really good for Enhancement Shaman off healing because Blizzard doesn't differentiate the two things.
And well, the one point about the two things there you talk about is that Enhancement Shaman healing rain is stronger because of our glyph than Resto Shamans.
Right, and so they get like chain heal and stuff too, so overall they'll probably be doing more healing than us. But we drop 1 healing rain. It's stronger than a Resto Shaman's healing rain. It's like 20-30% more-ish, because we don't have as much spell power than them, but it's also doing double healing, so it's a lot more. But yeah, so it's pretty good. Pretty good.
Oh, definitely. And it was just, I just looked over at chat real quick while I was on your camera, is that healing rain definitely depends on where you are position-wise. And where Enhanced Shaman healing is the really big deal and where it's the bee's knees is in that phase. For example, current tier, Megara, and especially Megara Heroic, I have seen multiple times where I reset the healing meter and going into a head phase when there's like 3 or 4 heads in the background, so there's tons of AoE. Healing rain will not only beat the Resto Shaman's healing, but if I AG at the same time, you're top healing the entire phase. Not outside of if there are tons of, if they're using spirit shells, so you actually don't get much because of all the absorb that's happening. But there's a huge spike where in those situations where you're grouped up, and there's lots of fights you group up for, the healing is just free, instant, and it happens in conjunction with the Shaman also doing incredible single target damage. So it's like an indispensable tool, and it's very, very, very powerful. And that's the reason why that it's just really powerful. And a lot of the fights in the future have those kind of stack-up phases, especially Malkarok, which we just noted on here, is that it's hard to not know that that is a huge thing that your guild, if you can take advantage of it, should definitely do.
Yeah, there were like 6 bosses this tier where you could just group up and heal through it, and you were getting really hurt, but then you just have Enhanced Shaman come up with healing rain and kind of just help level out the healing.
Yeah,
it really helps.
That's something to note too. The healing rain, as it is for Resto, is never going to save someone's life. Usually, it's just the blanket effect. What's going to save people, which I talked about earlier, is AG, because the damage is based on our damage. So the stronger we get, the stronger the heal gets, and it's a smart heal, smart target right off the bat for the next 10 seconds of when we're DPSing. So when we line it up with things, if we need a huge burst cooldowns, like after a shock blast on Heroic Animus, for example, you can save lives really, really easily, and it just happens, and it just helps other healers work and do their job as well. So it's a really good cooldown to take advantage of.
Mm-hmm. I'm seeing a lot of talk in chat about how this is really niche healing that we're talking about, that they think this isn't really going to apply in a lot of places. So I'd like to point out the lists that me and Primalshock brought up of all the encounters where it is helpful on. So for instance, let's talk about tier 14 first.
Sure.
So in tier 14, there was phase 2 of Amber Shaper. Everyone stacked up, everyone gets full, and there's a lot of raid damage going out. So healing rain was really good at that point. It wasn't used as much back then because back then most Enhancement Shaman didn't really realize like the full benefit of healing rain. Like I know I didn't use it. I'm sure Purge used it because he knew like more about its powerfulness before I did. But it wasn't very well known. And then there's not just like Amber Shaper. There was phase 2 of Queen, Queen, whichever,
Empress.
Whatever, Empress. Thank you. Her phase 2, there's also a lot of damage going out, and I actually did drop healing rains in that phase because it was just so strong. And then there's also Windlord. On Windlord, not as much healing rain, but whenever he gets empowered and doing a lot of damage, AG, you pop AG, you're doing more damage to him, which means you're doing more healing to your entire raid, and it's spreading to everyone. It doesn't matter if you're stacked up. It spreads to everyone, and it's amazing. And then more fights that I'm just going to go through. The second boss in Moshugan Vault, I don't remember his name. The arcane stacking phase of that, healing rain is good there. Basically, Elgon phase 2, I used healing rain there with AG because AG did more healing because the boss took more damage and everyone was stacked up in melee. And then there was also, so basically what I'm trying to say is that that's just last tier. That's like what 5 bosses last tier. The tier who had 16 bosses. What was it? It was
This
16,
tier,
right?
this tier is what,
Last tier.
13? Oh, last
Yeah,
tier
this tier is 13.
was last tier 16 over the course of 3 instances.
I don't really.
It was
remember.
4, 7.
Yeah,
and...
it was.
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
16
6
because
and
you had
4.
6, 6,
16.
and 4. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. So yeah, and then this tier where it saw a lot more use on progression fights. Like this Healing Rain gave, like for instance, Dread had. I wasn't in Dread at the time. It had Rusa, the Enhancement Shaman, and Purge, the Enhancement Shaman. And Healing Rain is like one of the reasons they got multiple kills on fights. They got a kill on Megara because Healing Rain. Every heavy damage phase of Megara, there's Healing Rains down. There was Iron Quan, phase 4, lots of damage going out. Everyone is also stacked up. Healing Rain's down, everyone's healed up. And then Jinrock, now, this is less relevant to progression, it's more relevant now, where people are able to just stack healing cooldowns, stack damage reduction cooldowns during the lightning storms, and just stack up, let the balls hit them, who cares, we can heal through it, we can take the damage, we've got a lot of stamina, we've got a lot of smoke bombs or whatever down, and Healing Rain is also useful there. That is relevant to progression rating, but that's still a big deal when it comes to, it makes farm more easier to do.
Well,
And
exactly,
then-
and that goes along real quick on your farm note, is that if you can make farm easier for guilds that actually complete tiers, usually that comes as a huge, like, relief, because you actually get some time to, like, not play WoW every night at that kind of stress level. You know, usually if you raid 4, 3, or 5 nights a week sometimes, to alleviate the need. I mean, we do it on Jinrock too. We just roll all the cooldowns and just stand in everything, whereas on progression, if you get hit by 2 lightning balls, you're done. But now because the throughput has come so much, and because of the how everything scales up, and especially for that, like we put 2 or 3 healing rains down on the melee, we just stand there. And that is not to be discredited, the fact that it's like farm content, but it alleviates more time in the week to do what you want to do when you're on like that progression ending farm curve. And if you know you have to keep farming for 4 months or more, it definitely helps to alleviate that bit of stress that comes in just like having to, it's 3 months in, and
Exactly.
you know, so
Yeah,
it's
I
definitely
mean,
a lot.
Farm's gonna go a lot quicker too, because you know you can probably just drop a healer and then have your enhanced shaman use their off heals. Like, I know that my guild, we you know, as we went through farm, we dropped healers just because the fights went a lot quicker and it shortened the time on farm. And I mean, having that support, I think, is going to be really beneficial, especially if you're farming for, you know, how many months? 3 months, 4 months. So, I kind of do see how it could work in that aspect.
No, definitely.
Yeah,
But then
and one of the, I mean, we've already shown the rod end logs and all that, and my healers are always yelling at me now, especially our resto shaman, that he doesn't want me to heal because he wants to rank, and they can't do it if I'm healing, because I'm just padding it so hard with healing grade.
yeah, that's such a true point too. Yeah, exactly.
Especially in how Reckoning is, whenever we get to a fight where we're kind of deep at a DPS check, it's the first thing said is let's drop a healer. And so if your guild wants to do that, enhanced shamans can really help bring up the healing for that. If you decide that, hey, let's try it without 1 less healer, and we'll go for the DPS.
No, definitely, that's a true point. We have dropped healers before on fights. I think we have everything that was 6 healed is now 5. Everything that was 5 is now 4. I do believe we 4 healed Raden this week, just because we knew that we had elemental healing. Not to break off on the tangent on them, is there. It's just nowhere in the same realm as enhancement healing. But if we ran 2 elemental and a resto and me on our Raden, we dropped a healer because you don't need it, because we've got all those other healing rains on top of the fact that mine's going to be huge and bursty, and we don't have to use the other healers. We don't need 5. There's no point. Just what Primal just said, and that's kind of an evolution of farm content exactly. But it definitely looks at different ways that you can heal through fights, and different ways you don't have to keep all your healers all the time. So awesome.
Yeah, I just read there's someone in chat's incoming nerfs for enhanced, but hasn't Purge tried to get us nerfed?
Yeah, me and
Yeah.
Purge have been telling Blizzard, hey guys, healing rate is a little overpowered. It's not fair that we lose no damage. Like, the amount of damage that we lose is like a rounding error. Like, it's explainable by a flame shock crit, like every, whatever, 10, 20 seconds. It's just really silly that we can do so much healing without any, like, with no impact to us, and there's so many fights that it's useful on, And I just don't understand why it hasn't been nerfed yet, because usually Blizzard does not like things like this. From what I can tell, whenever they make changes, they always want to nerf this kind of things. And yet, Healing Rain, they could easily nerf it. They could remove it from the Healing Rain glyph, or they could remove Healing Rain from the Healing Storm glyph, so that Healing Storm only affects Healing Surge and Chain
Direct, yeah.
Yeah, so that would make a lot more sense, but they're not doing it. We'd still do good healing. Like, we would still be able to do as good of healing, maybe probably a little bit better healing if we would do as good of healing as Shadow Priests and Boomkins if the raid is like spread out all fight, and then when the raid isn't spread out all fight, we'll still be beating them, but we won't be beating healers or almost beating healers anymore. So it's such an easy fix, and they're just not doing it for some reason. So one side of me is like, why aren't they doing it? The other side is me really happy that they're doing it because I get to ruin our healers' ranks, and that's always fun.
Well, yeah.
If they do it, I want them to
It's
fix our AoE
ironic
first.
to ask for nerfs.
We have before, though. That's part of the chat that I guess Chill just alluded to. Really, it's a thing because there are parts of the game that, and what he talked about too, is that Blizzard doesn't like things that are like this. That we get too much efficiency out of not trading something for it as well. There really is nothing we trade to do this. It just happens.
Maybe this is why we have such crap AoE. It's like,
Well,
hey, you got really awesome healing AoE, but you're gonna have really bad damage AoE. So sorry, this is your trade-off.
That was a point we were going to bring up, that Elemental and Enhancement both have great single target, but Elemental Shamans have great AoE and terrible healing, and we have awesome AoE healing but terrible AoE.
And our single target's a little better than theirs.
Well, no. Yes, it is, but
So much better.
we'll talk about that when we do DPS episodes. But if there's nothing else on Enhanced Summon Healing, I think we've beaten it a bit to death right now. We have a question that came in. Every part of the show at the end is going to be question-oriented. This one was a kind of a big question that I didn't feel we needed multiple ones for, because this one does affect more than just Shamans. It was directed at myself and Purge, Chill, and Primal, but it does affect multiple people as well. So just forget about the fact that we're talking about Enhanced Shaman cooldowns, and just listen to the fact of what we're trying to go over here. But this question came in from Rothleduk. I will have cards for these in the future, but right now I just don't have them. Again, pilot episode. But Rothleduk asks if he should hold off cooldowns such as Elemental Mastery, Ascendance, Fire Elemental Totem, Berserking, and Engineering Gloves if you're a troll and an engineer, until both trinkets are up, which we're talking about the RPPM trinkets, which are the Bad Juju, and the Ranataki's Soul Charm. Should he hold all five of his major cooldowns until both trinkets are up, or just one of them, or pop cooldowns as soon as they're available? What should he do in that situation?
Right. And so this is going to apply, I think, to most classes. The only spec that I can think of that it doesn't really apply to is Windwalker monks, who would be saving their brews generally for when they have they get their trinket from Lei Shen to proc. And so when that happens, they'll hold off their buffs for that trinket proc. But pretty much everyone else I can think of doesn't really wait for trinket procs. And because the reason that is that trinket procs are so unreliable right now. Like, at least when they had an ICD last year, and a lot of the ones next year it looks like are going to have an ICD, that you could know roughly when they're going to pop. Like, you knew it was going to be roughly in minute 40 or whatever the ICD was, in minute 45. But right now, you actually have no idea unless it's at the start of the fight. If it's at the start of the fight, then you're popping all your cooldowns, you have your pre-pot, and all of your trinkets are proccing, so you're doing massive amounts of damage, especially so for Enhancement. You're topping at like 1.2 million burst damage, or damage per second, and that's really cool, but you can't really do that at any other point in the fight. I would say that unless there's a phase that you need to save that DPS cooldown for, like say on Megara, you need to hold off 3-minute cooldowns for the Frozen Head, because Frozen Head needed to die first, or the fastest of all the heads. If there's not something like that, then you just really need to be using it on cooldown, or putting it off a little bit to line up with other cooldowns. Like, for instance, on Garajal, which was a 7-minute fight, you would hold on to your Fire Elemental because you weren't glyphing it on progression. You would hold off your Fire Elemental for 1 minute, and then just pop it when you also have Ascendance and your Racial if you're a troll, and your Elemental Mastery if you're respect into that, and you have and your pre-pot in Lust, and so you just pop that, and all that stuff is lined up. But other than that, you don't really line up your trinkets.
Yeah, like that's personally what I do is I have weak auras for my 2 trinkets, and what I will do is I will on the beginning of fights even I'll delay a couple seconds into them being procced so that I get 15 seconds of the trinket with Ascendance, not just like I have a tail end with the strongest side of Renataki up or whatever. You just kind of hold it a little bit there. So there are things you can do to maximize your trinket timing, but basically after the pull, just use them, right? If you have one that's a minute and a half or one that's 2 minutes, the minute and a half is going to be up before the 2 minute. But you can wait for the 2 minute to be up to pop with the minute and a half, right? There are some you can line up together, but then don't just wait for all of them every time. That is a DPS loss. Yes.
I'm sure that's a huge DPS loss. Just to
yeah.
have to wait.
Mm-hmm. Nothing to add, Primal.
Well, Primal had his other question. We split the questions up.
Yes, that is true. And now, taking that even farther, is with all of your cooldowns involved, should you also wait for the magic moment that you have both Trinket procs and Dancing Steel, which is the top, DPS enchant right now, but insert your ranged, caster one as well. What is the priority on weapon procs, and how much does that impact your rotation and your trinket and cooldown usage?
I've never waited for Dancing Steel. It's got a huge uptime. I think it's upwards of 60% or something when I looked at a log for me, and so I mean, it's probably up, but I'm not gonna wait for it. Especially waiting for trinkets, because it's exactly as Purge said, where if you get a moment where you have both trinkets, both Dancing Steels up, that's a god moment right there. That's very good. That's gonna be very rare, and to sit on trinkets for that magic moment or to sit on cooldowns for that magic moment it does not make any sense whatsoever. I mean, it'd be cool if you could, when we get internal ICD trinkets back, and you can math out exactly when. Then yeah, I'd say if you can math it out and be like, okay, it's gonna be here. I'm gonna have them up here. It's roughly close to my cooldowns. I'll wait. But unless there's a specific burn phase you need cooldowns for, or you need to sit on them to help heal with AG, there's really no point to sit on cooldowns.
Yeah, so there's some weaving parts, but most of the time just don't wait on them. Just roll them as they come up, just for consistency, right?
And Rusa, not Purge, Rusa would like to point out, because he really wants me to specify that was him and not Purge.
All right, that's perfect.
If, say you have a 3-minute cooldown up right now, and the fight only has 2 minutes left, you are only going to get 1 use of that cooldown no matter what. So it would be beneficial to hold off on that cooldown until, say, you get a Bloodlust, or until you get at least one Trinket proc, and then use it, so that you get benefit of 1, and you have like 2 minutes left to be able to kind of play with that cooldown, and so you're not really losing DPS if you're saving it, basically. But you don't really want to wait for both, because that's really unlikely.
Okay, gotcha. I did have just a question that came up in chat that I thought was pertinent real quick here. It was asked if we are going to be if these guys are going to be the hosts of every show we have on. So Final Boss, you're shaking your head no. Final Boss is going to be a show that I host, and that I have a co-host, which she's right over here. We will be consistent on every show. However, our guests are going to be with the round table part of the show. Chill and Primal are our first guests for the pilot episode. And you will find out soon, even though it was leaked a little early, who our guests are for next week's show. And that's the point of the show, is we want to bring on these raiders, these top-tier people around the world to talk about endgame raiding and what it involves in. So every week, you can look forward to different classes, different specs, different like paragons of their class, basically, to talk to you, and you get their thoughts, their inputs, their opinions, their feedback, their Q&A on all these different topics about raiding, especially. And yeah, so you'll see my face every week, and this beard, and Jenni's lovely face. But sadly, the beard competition may have to be postponed, because not everyone is going to have great beards like Chill and I. But just because they're on the show once doesn't mean they won't be back again. That's also a point I should mention too, is that if you have special guests that you love and want to hear from more, they will definitely be around but we do want to rotate around a lot and get a whole bunch of awesome feedback from all these great players. So just to answer your question from chat room. And unless there's anything else pressing from chat room that you guys saw or the mini bosses wanted to bring up real quick, we can address that, as this is the pilot, as it were. But just let me know real quick.
Well, I know there was one question asking how torn up you were about how chat basically voted that I had a better beard than you.
Really?
Yes,
is that
was a question.
Is it because I shaved before the show? Because I was much more lumberjacky before the show, but I shaved it also because I work at a hospital, so I can't be burly all the time. But I don't know. Do you really think? Let's just go back and forth here real quick. We want to do a style pose.
I think we all know who the beard winner is. That's me. I won. I win. I have the best beard.
She was sporting some facial hair there.
Does she have? I thought I was about to go to your camera and hope you were holding your hair up like it was like a a huge beard. Then you would.
I could have like a dwarven. Let's see if we can get.
Oh no! It's happening. Yes. Final boss featuring the co-host, a bearded lady. Would that bring in more? Is that going to be a thing for Twitch?
Now,
I don't know.
Now Primal
well,
just
you know,
something.
people are into weird things these days. You know, can't really say it's unattractive. Just all natural, man. Maybe I have problems. I don't know, polycystic ovary syndrome or whatever.
It's the way nature like intended, man.
Bearded ladies is nature intended.
Dude.
She looks
You're not supposed to shave your hair. It's what nature wants.
I don't know what chat room says about that, but bearded ladies, yes or no? So on the way out of this, on FinalBoss.tv, I have no other way to segue from bearded ladies. FinalBoss.tv is where you want to submit your questions each week. If you have a certain spec or class or person even that you want to ask a question, you can log that away. We will keep all these questions in tow until they become applicable on the show. Or if you know what's coming up next week, you can submit your question whenever you like, and we'll pick the best ones to put on the show. Speaking of next week, I guess I can let the bomb drop if you don't know. Sko of Method and Slootbag from Midwinter will be on the show next week. We will be talking about tanks and vengeance and what's better for DPS with tank vengeance and what's better for mitigation with tank vengeance and all these numbers. I can't wait till they start putting up logs and having this back and forth to build all of these almost very theory crafty and mathy oriented things, because we want to answer these questions for you guys. So that is next week's show. Is going to be Sko and Slootbag. And I think though we are just about a little over time, I believe, and I think we might as well get out of here or stop wasting you guys Sunday evening. But this has been a lot of fun. You guys are awesome. The mobs and the minions of Final Boss. Again, go to finalboss.tv to submit us questions, and we will see you guys later. You guys can also check out more of Reckoning over here and this orange-shirted guy at reckoningwow.com.
Yeah. I have a YouTube and I post shit too. It's Twister4418. You can I just killed Lich King.
It'll be on everyone in the crew, cast and crew does have a page on the website that you guys can check out if you want to see more about them and their social networking, such as this gentleman right here, which apparently is now voted the best beard final boss. Which I don't know about that, but this is Chillbros of Dread.
I'm sorry, Bae. You have to be gracious.
I have to be gracious. That's fine. Again, I think it's because I shaved. I won't shave next week. I'll just come full man mode. I'll go for it.
Alright. Maybe I'll have to make a guest appearance.
Maybe. I'll just bring you in for beard rulings. That's fine. Totally fine. And of course, joining me this week and for many weeks to come, our lovely co-host, Jenni.
And goodbye.
Hello and goodbye. You can follow her, as has been posting up all night. If we have streams, usually I'm going to promote our streams because all of our social networking stuff is there. Twitter, Facebooks, and whatnot. So you can go check her out there and watch her raid. And then there is, of course, apparently if I'm not going to be the best beard in the show, I don't even know why I'm doing this right now. But this is me. I'm at BayTLM on the Twitch. And I'll try to make a better beard for you guys in the future. But from all of us here at the Final Boss crew, and from, apparently, if you guys want to, praise his beard more than mine, we wish you guys a good week raiding. We will see you next Sunday, right here on Final Boss TV. Have a great one, guys.
Later.
Bye.
Bye.